Hello fellow engineers, and today we're going to look at the Geneva Wheel and how to create this in FreeCAD. So in front of you there's the Geneva Wheel animation from Wikipedia. So as you can see, what a Geneva Wheel is it's a mechanism that allows a circular motion to be converted into an intermediate one. So this wheel here is also called the Maltese cross. It's often used in watchmaking. And the reason why it's called the Geneva Wheel is because that's the country that it was very first used in, and it was used in watchmaking. They're often encased in oil as well for large mechanisms because it needs to be well lubricated. So what actually happens is this wheel is continuously spinning in a circular motion, and that circular motion is converted into an intermittent one. And what happens is that for every single 360-degree rotation of the drive wheel, the Geneva wheel is actually rotated a portion of 360 degrees, depending on how many slots there are. So this one's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 slots. So this will be 6 divided by 360. So if we take slots as n, it'll be n over 360. They're often used they're actually used in CNC machines to select to allow for tool selection. They're also used in such machines like Scientific for actually picking samples, and also they were used in early I forget what they're called now, image projection. So you would have an image on screen and film projection. So film would actually pass through a Geneva wheel, and each time it stopped, a light will shine through the film, projecting that onto the actual screen itself for a set number of seconds or milliseconds, depending on how fast this wheel was turning and how many slots are actually in the actual Maltese cross or Geneva wheel itself. So that's the outline of Geneva Wheel, and what we're going to do in FreeCAD is actually create this. So I'm going to take you through a instructable that's been created by someone. I'll tell you who he is because I've forgotten what his name is, and I'll show you how to actually approach the instructable and actually create this Geneva Wheel from scratch. I've tried it a couple of ways, and I found the easiest way is to actually do each part of the build in a separate sketch, and using certain techniques that I've talked before in other videos, we can actually create this wheel. I wouldn't say quite easily, but it was a challenge to do this, but I got through it. I found certain techniques to use, especially from the perspective of someone who's just starting out in FreeCAD. Can be quite a large project to take on, but I would advise you to do take on this project because you will learn a lot from actually creating the wheel, and also it's a lovely mechanism. Okay, so that's enough jibber jabber for now, and I'll take you through how to create this wheel. To create the Geneva wheel, I'll be using this instructable from a person called Ken S12, and he's originally converted this tutorial from someone else. He's got permission from them. Now I've emailed Ken, and I haven't had any information back from him at the moment, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind me actually creating a video tutorial of this and carrying on the actual chain of converting this into different tutorials for different programs that are out there. So Ken himself, the author, is a 78-year-old guy who's keeping his brain and mind and body young by creating different woodworking projects, and it's well worth looking at his oh, Google Plus, bloody hell. Sorry, let me just go back one. It's well worth looking at his that's it more about Ken, what he's created. So 7 months ago he's created this one-hand paper towel dispenser. and he's done a number of projects on here, so he's obviously very competent with his woodcraft and CAD. So it's nice to see people are just doing this for the love, really. So I'm going to take Ken's well-written tutorial and convert it to probably overcomplicate and convert it to FreeCAD with this video. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, where is it? So is this triangle here. So Ken talks about the actual steps to creating the Geneva Wheel itself. So the first one is to actually create this guide triangle. So point A is 180 divided by the number of slots you want in the Geneva Wheel. So if we're doing 4 slots, well, it'll be 45 degrees. So 4 times 45 is 180, I hope. Yes, it is. A to B is the radius of the Geneva Wheel. And obviously here, because this is the right triangle, if we flip it to the left, rotate it to the left, we'll have 90-degree angle here. Obviously this one is whatever's left over. So the first things first, in FreeCAD we're going to actually create this this triangle as a guide. So then I'll jump over to FreeCAD and actually start doing that. So I've opened up to FreeCAD here, and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to jump over to the part design. Part design, and we wait. So you have to bear with me because I'm on a laptop here, so you'll hear a lot of touchpad clicking. So you can see down here I've got touchpad selected. If you was using some other device, i.e. desktop machine, you'll be either using the CAD, or if you're used to Blender, you'll be using the Blender setting here. So I'm using touchpad setting here because I'm on a nice clunky laptop. So first thing we do is we're in part designer, and we're going to create our body. And from there I'm going to create a new sketch, and I'm going to take the XY plane because we're looking down on it and hit OK. So from the tutorial, if you remember, the first thing we need to do is actually create a triangle. So I'm going to use it by using the create a polyline in the sketch, and I'm going to start from the actual middle, work my way out, and I'm just going to create a rudimentary triangle first, and use constraints to actually create the correct size. So now we create this triangle. First thing I'm going to do is press escape, so I'll get my normal pointer back, and I'm going to constrict that line on the horizontal, and I'm going to constrict these two. By clicking onto these two edges, I'm going to constrict that to 90 degrees, and I will constrict the edge here, this point here, to the middle of the sketch. I did. Let's talk about. There we go. Did I click on the wrong one? Must have done. Okay, so we've got our sketch, our guide constricted now 90 degrees. So we've got a right angle triangle, and restricted that'll be the hypotenuse, if you can say it, on the horizontal. So now I want to actually fix this angle here. So I want jump back to our step. So we want this one 180 divided by the number of slots. Okay, so I want this 4 slots. So 180 divided by 4 is 45. So click on those two and set this to 45 degrees. and this length here is going to be the diameter, I believe, the Geneva wheel. Sorry, the radius of the Geneva wheel. And I'm going to set that I'm going to set that to 100. So here it's got to fix the length of the line between the distance between the line and the vertex. So 100 along there. 100 millimeters to 100. No, I'm going to go for 200 there. Let me just zoom out. Using pinch motion on the actual trackpad to zoom in and out. Oops, can be a bit tricky sometimes. So there we have it. So we have our guide already done. So we've got our triangle, so 45 degrees here for the 4 slots that I want. 200 millimeters radius, and this will be this will end up being the length that divide that one side to the left here will be your Geneva wheel, and one side to the right here will be your actual pinwheel. So the next step is actually to create one of the wheels. To create the lock wheel, we'll have to actually jump to step 7 of Ken's instructions. So what we're looking at step 7 is this lock wheel here, the Geneva wheel as a guide, so we just want this outline, and also the placement of the slot and this horizontal, this vertical line to actually determine the radius of this lock wheel. So with that in mind, we're going to start sketching. So in FreeCAD, we now have this sketch, which is going to be our guide, so it's well worth renaming this. So this is our guide. And what I'm going to do is jump back to our body, our part design, close the sketch first, that'd be a good idea. So jump to our body, our part design, go to tasks, and go to create sketch, and you want it on the XY plane. Now the thing to remember is that when we create a sketch, some of the previous sketches will be made invisible. So we want to change the visibility of this sketch so we can actually see the guides behind. So now we've got the guide in front of us. We are now going to name this lock wheel. And now we can actually start creating our wheel. So our lock wheel is going to sit on this point of the sketch. Our Geneva wheel will be sitting on this point of the sketch. Now remembering that this line here is 200, this is the actual diameter of the Geneva wheel. So the first thing I'm going to do is put the Geneva wheel in as a guide. Now I am going to do something different than what I did before. I'm going to actually add it to the guide here. So I'm going to close here, come out of the lock wheel, go into the guide, and actually add the Geneva wheel here. Well, the circle of the Geneva wheel. So let's make this constraint. Go down to constraints on the left hand side here. I'm just going to get rid of this a second. I'm going to just make it invisible so we don't see it, and the 45 degree one I can make it visible as well. So I'm going to click on this point, and this is where our wheel is going to go. So using the circle tool, and it's going to be 200. Just around about there. Let me just zoom out a bit, too far. And obviously we want to restrict the radius of this, restrict the radius of the actual wheel itself. So I'm going to press escape, get a normal pointer bank, select the wheel, constrain the circle to 200 millimeters, and already put a constraint in here, so that's all good. So now we've got our guide to the actual wheel itself. So we'll go back to the lock wheel. Always remember, not lots. I should be doing this to close your sketch, otherwise you'll get yourself in a right old pickle trying to figure out whereabouts you are. So edit lock wheel sketch. Remember this is our guide. So I'm going to add our lock wheel in here. If I look back at the instructions, the pinwheel behind needs to intersect at this point, the top of the actual triangle here. So I'm going to do that. No, I'm not. I'm going to actually put this lock wheel in. Just going to put this lock wheel. I'm going to leave the pinwheel alone. Just put this lock wheel in. So this first thing I've got to do, I'm actually going off piece here a bit. So the first thing I've got to do is create this hole here. So this slot, I'm going to have a 20mm peg in here. So this circle here has got to be close to 20mm. Well, actually, the circle has to be 20mm. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Oops. So I'm going to use the create an edge link to external geometry because I want to bring in part of my guide sketch, and I'm going to bring in this left edge. So escape to get your cursor back, click on the create a circle, and we're going to create a 20mm circle, and using our arc constraint, constraint to 20mm, press escape, and then I'm going to move this into place, and because I've imported this edge, I'll get these points in as well, so I can actually click on these 2 points, circle and the external guide geometry, and constrain those up. And I'm going to use the same size circle for the centers as well. But the next thing we've got to do is actually place a horizontal line, sorry, a vertical line, I keep on saying horizontal, a vertical line on the left hand edge here. And this will be our guide. So click on the line tool. Just going to bring the line down like so, and I'm going to press escape to get my pointer back and use the create a vertical constraint on that line, and also pressing escape I'm going to click on the top node and the circle and use the fixer point onto an object constraint. So that's all constrained up now. And the next thing we're going to do is, now that's constrained, I'm going to use the circle tool and I'm going to create the lock wheel. Now from this point in the guide geometry, the right hand point of the triangle, I'm going to create a circle and I'm going to bring the circle out so it touches that vertical line, this vertical line here. There we go. Pressing escape to get a pointer back. Now I'm just going to move it and click on the 2 points and add a constraint. So that wheel now is touching this vertical constraint line. And if we look back at our instructions, we can see the next step is to actually remove a section here, and also to add our center hole for our mounting. So I'm going to remember that this hole is 20 millimeters. I'll do the same here. Constraining it to 20 mils, and then I'm going to constrain it to the center, which looks like it's already done. It's interesting. And we now want to import this geometry, and what I'm going to do is, I'm going to actually see if I can trim this part off of here using the trim tool from the external geometry. I can't. So if that's the case, I'm going to have to create a circle here to actually allow me to trim this section out. So let's constrain this wheel to enables 200. That's in the right place. And what I want to do now is, using the trim and edge, I am going to remove this edge here. So now I can actually move this wheel out. Ooh. Sorry, I haven't actually removed the rest of the wheel. So I can remove the rest of the wheel. Get rid of this. Matter of fact, I don't need this circle either, so that can go. This guideline can go. This part can go as well. So now, if I move this, that wasn't constrained. Constrain that to the actual center here. So now you can see this is a non-constrained object, so we have to fix this. So let's constrain those two first. And these two. Doesn't like that, so I'm just going to test this now to see. Nope, still got a problem. That's better. So that's nicely constrained now. And we've got our almost finished our lock wheel. So let's see what else we got. it actually looks like we have finished the lock wheel. So there is a step of actually backing the lock wheel back a tad, because you need it to fit inside. So we can do that by just click this constraint, 106, and there we go. So that's 206 mil. So we just move that back off the edge there. Might be a bit too much, actually. I think that is. So we're going to go 204. There we go. So that's just taken that off that edge there. So don't need this anymore. Let's point this here. So I'm going to get rid of that from the guide. So I'm going to close this, come into our guide, and delete that wheel. And then we'll look back at our lock wheel. You can see now our lock wheel is complete. So the next thing I'm going to do is move on to the Geneva wheel itself.